I'm Gareth Young. I am standing for the constituency of Garff in this September's general election. My reasoning behind why I'm wanting to stand is simply due to the fact that I would like to try and leave the island a better place. And my children are growing up here and I want to see things improving for them. And I'm a big believer in the fact that if you want to see things change and you want to actually have things move forwards and be progressive, then you need to be willing to put yourself out there as well. So I originally looked at it a few years ago, but we just had our second daughter, and our other daughter was on the way, so it wasn't really a place where our family was in to be able to actually, for me to take the leap and try this. But now we are, so here I am.
And standing as a member of the Manx Labour Party, why for them?
I grew up originally in a very conservative led household in my dad. And then when I was young, my parents split and my mum and stepdad, who he's been that father figure for me for 30 odd years now, just talked me through differences and which way they leant because of those differences. And I'm a big believer in kind of keeping as much of the public aspect for the people as possible. Don't get me wrong, I understand that businesses and private enterprise has its place with everything, and you have to build really good partnerships with that between the public side of things and the private side of business. But I tend to lean towards the left because of those policies that really look after things like education and the NHS and the welfare systems, and I'm a true believer in them. So,
well, we'll talk about that in a little while, though. But I do have to ask you first, why have you gone straight for the House of Keys and not down the local authority route?
Aim high, more than anything. So
I suppose people listening who are members of local authorities might think, oh, what does that mean?
My viewpoint was the fact that I wanted to try and help as much as possible. And the way that I could do that was to aim for the House of Keys rather than just the local commissioners, because if I want to leave the island a better place for everybody, then I think you need to have the wider perspective rather than just the local area. And don't get me wrong, the local area is really important. There's lots of issues in Garff that need looking into and that need sorting out. And I want to work on those things, but those bigger projects as well, you can only really affect as a member of the House of Keys.
Well, as most candidates this time, you are very active on social media. You have to be these days, really, to reach out to your potential constituents. I just want to go through some of the pledges that you've detailed on your Facebook page.
Yep.
Actually, first, let me just pick up on that word, pledges. It's a strong word, isn't it? And surely you need to acknowledge it really isn't possible to give any guarantees, even if you were elected to the Keys.
You're right, it's not possible to give a guarantee on things, but what I can guarantee is that I will graft for those pledges and I will work hard at each one of those to try and deliver them as much as I possibly can do. And I think that's something that if you spoke to the students that I teach, the people that know me, they all know me for the fact that I will work hard at absolutely anything and everything I do. And I'll give everything that I can to make them work. And while you can't say, yes, it's going to definitely happen, I will do my level best to make sure that it does. So,
well, let's go through some of the pledges then. If you were elected, you say you'd work for a greener, more sustainable future. I have to be honest, surely that is such an easy bandwagon to jump on now. Tell me exactly what you would do realistically. What does that sentence mean in practice?
So in practice, when you look at, say, for example, our power grid on the Isle of Man, I'm a science teacher. I'm a physicist by trade. So looking at how electricity works, how the power grid works and things like that, I genuinely find quite interesting, which most people think is a bit strange, but it's one of those. So for me, it's looking at moving us away from fossil fuel dependency. It's looking at putting proper renewables in place and having that proper plan for how to move there.
Those plans have been mooted before, though, haven't they?
They have, unfortunately, and I would say I was probably disappointed in the last kind of vote for how we were going to move towards carbon neutrality, and the fact that we're looking at 2050. It's not in any way, shape or form ambitious for such a small island with such a small population. We could easily do it if we were truly committed. And I think the fact that there isn't really that committed forward progressive motion on it, that's where we need somebody to lead forwards on it. Okay, so imagine that you are that person then. You're elected to the Keys. What's the first thing you do then to get you on that road? On that road, one of the first thing that I would look to is moving our electricity generation towards renewable energy. So my first active business on that is to try and drive towards putting in a truly renewable energy source. Easiest one to go for with an island such as ours is offshore wind. That's not going to be popular with everyone. It's not going to be popular with everybody, but we can't keep burning fossil fuels at the rate that we do, especially with climate change and the fact that they're running out and our dependency on a gas line that goes to the UK. We can't just keep ploughing forwards the way we are. We have to make a change and we have to take that leap forwards. If you put an offshore wind farm in, if you look at some of the new, more substantial wind turbines, such as like the Halide X, for example, you're looking at £1 million per kilowatt produced. You would be able to produce the entirety of the Isle of Man's energy off 15 turbines, which isn't very much realistically. I'm going to agree with you on that one because you are a physics teacher. You know much more about that than I possibly do. I have done the research on it, thankfully. So. The one thing, though, when you think about a more sustainable, a greener future, you look out in the Isle of Man and we can see it from the studio windows here, the number of cars on the road and people's dependency on that. I mean, surely that's one of the first things you'd have to tackle. Yeah, the cars and moving cars off the roads or moving to a more sustainable version, electric cars, hybrids, vehicles, you could very easily go down the route of saying we're not going to produce fossil fuel only cars from 2025. But we don't have the say on that over here, though, do we? We don't. But if you worked with the local businesses to encourage the growth of the hybrid sector and the electric sector properly, and then moved us towards we only sell hybrids or electric cars in 10 years' time, I don't think that is an unreasonable ask of people if you do the work properly. I wonder if you're being a little bit ambitious there, Gareth, because I'd like to be there actually when you have that conversation with the garages. Yep, I can imagine it's going to be a difficult conversation for both sides realistically, because the truths have to be understood from both sides of it. Like from a government side of things, you have to understand the logistics of that for their businesses and how it would affect their businesses, and you've got to put mitigating factors in there to make sure that they don't just plummet under because of something you're changing, because that just affects people's livelihoods. And if you do the work properly and you do the groundwork properly, I think you could do it, but it's whether or not both sides would be willing to take the leap together. And it's whether you could bring all the other members of Tynwald with you on something like that, I guess. It is, yeah. OK, another of your pledges is to stand shoulder to shoulder with the people of Garff on issues important to them. What are those issues? So one of the biggest issues currently, say, is in Laxey, which is our sewage treatment. My personal viewpoint, and I will quite happily put this out there, is the fact that I do not think we should have a local treatment solution for the Laxey Bowldrine area. I think that we should be pumping it out to Miriveg through the Iris connection in Onken. I think it is the best solution, and it's the best solution that gives us longevity as well. Is it a plausible solution? It is, realistically. If you look at the 2008 report that was done into it, there was only a £1.6 million difference between putting a pipeline in and doing local treatment, and the local treatment option would then have to be renewed every 20 years or so, which would be problematic. You'd then still be looking at the issues surrounding something as simple as, say, for example, when the local laundry would do a caustic wash of all its laundry stuff, you'd have those chemicals hit the iris, which would kill off all the bacteria in it, which would reset them, which would be problematic. You did have a local brewery until it's been moved on now. They would do the same kind of thing, and those kinds of things would cause havoc with an IRBC, whereas with the pump out to Miriveg for proper treatment, it wouldn't be an issue. It would be all diluted down by the time it got there. I suppose that there's something to be said with, if it's that simple, why hasn't that just been done? I don't know, is the simple answer to that. I'm unsure as to why the there has been that shift towards the local treatment instead of the pumping to Mirriveg. Because when Mirriveg was put in place, it was designed to take all the island sewerage. It was the whole point of it was to pump everywhere there, treat it properly, and let it flow out to the sea completely treated. And I'm unsure as to why they're now moving away from that strategy, which is going to cost us more in the long run. Something as simple as putting the IRBCs means you have to move the effluent, the solid effluent, out of Laxey in a tanker twice a day to then be treated at Mirriveg anyway. So we should just pump it all there and job done.
First interview on the radio during the election campaign, and we're talking about effluent already. This can only get better, fabulous. Can't it? Another of your pledges, Gareth, is to develop partnerships in the local community to ensure social and economic fairness. Now, at the beginning, you said this is something that you feel very strongly about. Yeah. Tell us then what's so unfair at the moment.
In terms of it, we have a GDP on the island of 5.5 billion, and yet we have a food bank that is constantly having to be donated to, constantly being emptied by people who require it. We have people who earn so little money that they can't afford to feed themselves properly. We have social care systems that fail people because there just isn't enough in the systems there currently. And one of the things that this comes back to is proper fiscal responsibility of government, making sure that the money is put in the right places at the right times. And that can be done in a variety of ways. It makes sure that we don't waste money that we're spending, making sure that we actually put money into the areas so that the bottom frontline services actually have the money to spend and are actually able to do things.
Now,
and
this is where being a politician means sometimes you are going to have to make unpopular decisions, because there is not an endless supply of money. So I'm just going to put an example to you, okay? So the Laxey Wheel is something that you feel strongly about. You want to see it turning again. To get that done is going to cost £750,000.
Yes.
I'm going to put it to you that £750,000 could be better spent in doing what you've just been talking about and making sure some people aren't on the breadline and aren't struggling. Yeah. Imagine you're in that position now, having to make that decision. What would you do? I
think the Laxey Wheel is a massively important tourist attraction.
It doesn't feed people though, does it?
It doesn't, you're right. But it does bring people to a local area that is full of small businesses, somewhere in the region of 27 local businesses to Laxey, there or thereabouts. And with that, if you can increase the amount of people that go into that area, then you increase the possibility for earnings and for them to then be able to support themselves properly without having government intervention. So from that side of things, it is a useful use of money.
So you would vote.
You
would vote for the Laxey Wheel.
I would love to see the Laxey Wheel start turning again. I really would do. The thing is, as well, what really frustrates me about the wheel is the reason it's not turning is due to a lack of maintenance and a lack of continual repair. And so we're now in the position where you say it's $750,000 to get it going. If we had looked after it properly, would it really have cost us $750,000 now? And that's a question I think that needs to be put forward, is whether or not, if we maintained our infrastructure properly and we maintained our attractions properly, would the cost be much less, and therefore those decisions would be much easier.
But hindsight is a wonderful thing, and you would be coming into a parliament where several decisions have already been made, and I would suggest you're quite idealistic about how you'd like to see the future of the Isle of Man and make sure that the vulnerable are well looked after. But there are going to be decisions that you're going to have to make along the way, and some of them, Gareth, are going to be really, really unpopular. How prepared are you for that?
I'm pretty prepared, to be honest with you. I have to make unpopular decisions every day. As everybody out there who's seen my Facebook page knows, I am a teacher, and having to stand there and justify your decision making in front of either other staff or the students or their parents is something that I do day in, day out. And in these kinds of decisions, if I have to make an unpopular decision, I will stand by my decision as long as it is the right decision. And if I make that decision, it will be the decision I think is right, and I will stand by that. I'm not somebody who just backs down or flip-flops from one side to the other. It's not in my nature. And clear decision making with proper reasoning behind it is what you will get from me.
Now, something else that is I don't want to call it a tactic, but it's something that is very prevalent, I think, in new candidates standing for the House of Keys, and that is criticising the government at every turn and just, saying that every decision that's been made over the past 5 years really has been the wrong one. Something that you have said, and I think this is on your Facebook page, is that the government isn't investing in the island's local talent pool. As we're speaking this week, actually, the Department of Enterprise launched its 2021 Manx internship programme. That came out of the Economic Recovery Fund last year. It gives students and interested people looking for work paid work experience across the sectors, across industries. It's at the national living wage, which is £10.19. That's investment in talent, isn't it?
You're right, it is. That is. And one of the things, I'm really quite pleased that has come out. When I originally put that post on, I think it was several weeks before I found out about the internship launch, and I think afterwards I actually promoted the internship launch as well as something that is really good about the island. Like you say, it's easy to criticise from the outside on things. It really is. I think some things that the government have done have worked really well. When this current sitting of Tynwald came about, I was really pleased to see them modernising some laws along the way. In some aspects of it, I think they did really well. In some aspects of it, I don't think they went far enough. So as an example for that, they modernised the abortion laws on the Isle of Man, which I think was a positive step forward for choice and for women's rights and quite a lot of other things. However, I personally feel like maybe there was another step we could have taken, which was to make sure that after those kinds of things have occurred, is there a support package that can be put in place for somebody? I've seen people take that decision because it's the only decision they had for themselves at the time. But then once they've had an abortion or something like that, there was no support package, no network for them to properly access afterwards. And I think building those other bits and pieces in as well is a really useful thing. So, like you say, it's easy to criticise from the outside. However, we do have to recognise that there is some good work going on there, and it's to make sure that as much of that good work happens as possible.
You're listening to an interview with Gareth Young, who's standing as a Manx Labour Party member in the constituency of Garff. Nearly at the end of our time for a chat here, Gareth, but you are a teacher, you're also a father of four, as you've mentioned. Yeah. Naturally, then, the future of the island's young people is very, very important to you. You want to see incentives for returning students. What is it that students want? What is it that would bring them back here?
It's not an easy question, because it's like, what does everybody want from the island? They want the ability to come back to the place they grew up. They want the ability to be able to strive out on their own a little bit. And one of the things that I know from personal experiences, there's a lot of young people that would like to come back but can't afford to come back to buy a house, to rent properly, those kinds of bits and pieces. And that's a big thing for students that want to return to the island, is being able to afford to step out of their parents' home, to step out of that shadow. And it takes quite a long time and sometimes a very, very well paid job to be able to do so.
That's going to be something that's pretty difficult to fix in the short term.
In the short term it is, but if we start putting the plans in place now, or as of September hopefully, then in 4 or 5 years' time we should hopefully start seeing some of those things come to fruition, like affordable housing or cooperative housing bonds as investment opportunities for people, those kinds of bits and pieces. And then we should hopefully start reaping the benefits of our students being able to return to the island, to clear jobs, a positive housing market, those kinds of bits and pieces.
A lot of this, though, does all boil down once again to that M word, and it's money and how you start financing this.
Yes, and from an outsider at the moment, it's very difficult to dissect where all the money on the island gets spent. If you actually read through the Pink Book, which is quite substantial and not the most interesting of reads, however, what it is doesn't really reflect everything that is happening. It can't do, because the document would be enormous. It's already large enough, isn't it? So I think if I get elected, I would like to properly analyse where things are being spent and see if there is any possibility of working with the relevant government departments in order to start financing it and start putting that money aside to make sure that these things happen for people.
Well, Gareth Young, you have about 30 seconds to speak to your potential constituents in Garff. Why should they place their vote with you this September?
5 years hard graft. That's what they will get out of me. 5 years hard graft, and then hopefully another re-election at the end of it for 5 more years.
A career politician then?
Maybe, hopefully.